And just like that, only 1 week left in the 2024 high school football regular season. Time sure does fly this time of year, doesn't it? Good afternoon, everybody, here on the ESPN Madison, ESPN Milwaukee, and Daily Dodge ESPN Beaver Dam YouTube channels. My name is Jesse Nelson, and this is the ESPN Wisconsin High School Football Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show. It is my pleasure to be joined here in the Everlight Solar Studio at ESPN Madison by the Dean of Madison Area High School Sports, Dennis Semrau. Can you believe, Dennis, we are already down to the last week of the regular season? For many teams that aren't playoff eligible, this is it for their seasons.
I'm still trying to figure out where August went, let alone September, and we're halfway through October. And the fact that we've had great weather for 8 weeks, that's phenomenal.
We have been in really good shape on Friday nights, and we hope that continues to be the case not only this week, but for those teams that are moving on into the playoffs, many of which we will be talking about here in just a few minutes, that we hope that weather stays nice all the way. I do recall wearing shorts to Camp Randall last year to call a state championship game. First time ever that I've been able to do that. So I hope we get to that point again this year. I'm a little lenient on the shorts policy.
But remember, a few years ago we had snow at
sure
Halloween.
Not
at Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to Wisconsin.
Definitely more expecting that than the former. Anyway, here we go. It is the ESPN Wisconsin High School Football Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show. With just 1 week left to go in the regular season, we unveiled the top 10 teams for the large division and small division. The small division consisting of schools with enrollment size 549 and lower. We expect these to be many of the teams who will be in the divisions 4, 5, 6, and 7 playoff field. The large schools, enrollment size 550 and more, expected to be in the playoff field for divisions 3, 2, and 1. Dennis, just for clarification, the reason why we have said it that way all season long is because up until this Friday night, when teams are either eligible to be in the playoffs or not, we don't know exactly where that cutoff is. So there are some teams, West Salem of our voters has come to mind as a team that thinks they'll be Division 3, but there's always that chance they could be Division 4, depending on the enrollment size of the teams that could be in Divisions 1 and the other larger schools that are in front of them. So that's the reason why this isn't a perfect science every week. We try to do this as close we can all season long. Anything I missed on that clarification, Dennis Semrau?
No, and you also had 2 Milwaukee public schools, which are just banned for switching conferences, and the commission are not doing the paperwork properly. So because those teams are out, you're going to have some shuffling. If somebody goes up, and with the performance factor this year, teams that go up, somebody's got to come down. So that's why this year I think is a little bit more interesting than past years because of that performance factor. Waunakee, for example, 2 years ago they were 1. Last year they were back to 2. Now, performance factor, they're 1. They might be 1 regardless, but because of the performance factor, they're going to be 1 for a while.
The one that stands out to me, actually, is DeForest from a few years ago. Had always been Division 2.
And then 3, right.
And the year that they actually beat Waunakee for the first time in a long time, we thought this could be an amazing state championship or state semifinal. They ended up being Division 3. Waunakee was 2, and they both end up playing in state championship games. That's one way to do it. So you never know exactly how it's all going to play out, and we will see how it all does unveil when the brackets are released this coming weekend. Can't wait to see what this playoff field looks like. It's going to be a very fun WIAA football postseason in all 7 divisions. Let's see some of the teams that will be the top contenders to reach Camp Randall Stadium and compete for a gold ball. Teams that will be competing for state championships on Thursday in our small school rankings. This is going to look very, very similar for many of you who joined us last week on the Rankings Reveal Show. In at number 10, the St. Mary Springs Ledgers, winners in one of the biggest games around the state last week in the Flyway Conference, 10-3 over the Mayville Cardinals. And now St. Mary Springs in play to potentially finish, Dennis, in a 3-way tie in the Flyway Conference for the number 1 spot, depending on how things play out this week.
Yeah, I thought this might be an overtime first field goal wins because there was 2 field goals. Will Stelmacher with a 1-yard run in the 4th quarter for St. Mary Springs. And I saw a quote from Coach Highland. He said that there's nothing like lying in the mud after a victory. That's how he described that kind of a game. Wow, we pulled it out in the 4th quarter. And because this is Coach Highland's last year, the guys really want to take him out. And they've got a 1 loss, so let's at least get a share of the conference title and move on. But that was a tough Mayville game they had. This week, Winnebago Lutheran, 3-3 in the conference. You never know. WLA That was one of my old rivals when I was in high school.
You feel pretty good about Springs in that contest, though, and here's where it gets interesting for them because Lomira is undefeated atop the conference right now. If Lomira beats Mayville this weekend, Lomira wins first place, Mayville would go down to third, and then Springs would finish in second in the conference. If Mayville beats Lomira, it's a three-way tie with everybody having beaten everybody in that three-team pack there of St. Mary Springs, Mayville, and Lomira. So that would be all share then of the conference title. So if you're a Springs fan, I guess that means you're probably pulling for Mayville to beat Lomira this week if you want to share that conference title. In at number 9 in the small school rankings here heading into Week 9 following the Week 8 games, it is the Prairie du Chien Blackhawks. 39-6, they crushed New Glarus in Week 8. Their last game coming up is at Lancaster, which will determine the Southern Wisconsin Conference title. Dennis?
Yeah, their last loss for the Blackhawks, 14-12 to Aquinas back in the beginning of the season. So they've been on a stretch, and they haven't allowed any more than 15 points a game all year. So that's pretty good. They got a 1,000-yard passer in Abe Amundsen. Blake Theory just made it over 1,001 yards, and between them, 40 touchdowns. So that's a great 1-2 punch. And like I said, their defense has been top-notch too.
It is Prairie du Chien and Lancaster meeting in the final week of the regular season. Lancaster 5-1 in Southern Wisconsin Conference play, so they could again share that conference title with the tiebreaker going to Lancaster if they can beat Prairie du Chien. The Blackhawks hoping to go unbeaten in conference play and get the conference title all to themselves. The number 8 team in this week's small school rankings, the Wrightstown Tigers, winners 36-7 over a Denmark team that has struggled throughout the course of this season. Wrightstown has clinched second place in the Northeastern Conference. Another team we're going to see in just a few moments is the top team in that conference. Wrightstown's final game coming up on the road at New London. Number 7 in the small school rankings this week, the Kiel Raiders, still undefeated, 35-0 shutout winners on the road at New Holstein. Dennis, we said don't sleep on New Holstein. Kiel had to show up for that game, and wow, did they. Shutout winners, 35-0.
Yeah. Now this week they get Kohler, Sheboygan, Lutheran, Christian. They got the tri-op. So,
we call that the Kohler Co-op program is what I would call that one if I was doing the... We have a high school bowling when I do the announcements. We have a lot of co-op programs. I just go with one name. That seems to be the easier way to do it.
That they've done that with the 6 school one. Try to put that in the headline sometime. No, you got to pick one. So, yep, they're rolling.
Kiel is 8-0, and yes, they have clinched the Eastern Wisconsin Conference title. You mentioned their final game coming up against that Kohler Sheboygan Lutheran Co-op program. Looks like Kiel will be unbeaten heading into the postseason if they take care of business here in week number 9. Number 6 in this week's small school media poll, the Freedom Irish. Yes, 49-6 winners over Sheboygan Falls. They are in front of Wrightstown as the champions of the Northeastern Conference, having beaten Wrightstown a couple of weeks ago. Freedom is your conference winner. They are undefeated on the season. Their final game this week is a nice test before they get ready for the postseason against Luxembourg Casco on the road. Remember, Luxembourg Casco is the defending Division IV runner-up from last year. And so Freedom has an awesome opportunity here to head into the postseason strong with a win this weekend. Dennis.
Yeah, 35 first-half points, Sheboygan Falls. Nice if you can get a running clock early, And, 49-6. They just put a hurting on them. Nixon Heineke had 101 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns in that game. So that's a nice way to celebrate, right?
Sure is. And it'll be interesting across multiple divisions how many teams from the Green Bay area end up making the trip down to Camp Randall Stadium. So we'll see how that all ends up playing out. In at number 5 this week, the Edgar Wildcats. Edgar, 47-0 shutout winners over Pacelli. Is that how I say that correctly? Pacelli? Pacelli? All right, quarter in the jar. Sorry, Pacelli. Who were watching the show here on the video stream. Edgar is 7-1. Their last game coming up is against Abbotsford, which is going to make for an interesting potential conference title type situation. Edgar clinches the Merrillwood Conference title with a win outright, but they split it 3 ways with Abbotsford and Auburndale if Abbotsford were to get the win over Edgar this weekend. So, again, potential 3-way tie in play if Edgar doesn't take care of business, but Edgar's been known to take care of business when they need to.
Yeah, they had that loss early to Stratford, and that's been it. So I expect to see them at Camp Randall.
Definitely a great possibility of that, I'd say. How about the number 4 team in this week's small school rankings? The Regis Ramblers. There's Regis, another forfeit win over Neelsville Granton, so they clinched the Clover Belt Conference title, and their last game coming up is against United Township in Illinois. That's also a forfeit win over Osseo Fairchild, so Regis kind of slowly getting into the postseason here down the stretch with a couple of interesting situations in weeks 8 and 9.
Yeah, you don't like to have a forfeit. They'll schedule another game, but still.
Not the same sense of urgency.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel the same way.
It doesn't. They're going to be happy to get some competition once they get to the playoffs.
I'd hate to be their first-round matchup because they're going to come in after a couple of opportunities where they just kind of cruised in the back half of the season. Would hate to be the first team up when it matters most, facing the Regis Ramblers, who are a perfect 8-0, will be a perfect 9-0 this year after their forfeit victory here in Week 9. So your top 3, again, this looks very familiar to last week. In at number 3, the Aquinas Blue Golds, who are 7-1. And Dennis, I feel like the story with them every week is how they lost that Week 2 game against Columbus, surprisingly. And since then, they've been so good, Aquinas has, including a big win in one that was circled last weekend in Week 8, 20-18 on the road at West Salem.
Yeah, Jacob Thornton to Will Hargrove, 32-yard touchdown pass. That was the game winner. They were down in the fourth quarter. And was at 18-14. They went for 2 and didn't get it, but they were able to hold on defensively. So 2018 win. Again, you get all these blowouts. A team like that, they've had so many close games during the season. That helps you in playoff because you've been there now. This game this week, if they get second, third round, they're going to go, hey, remember Week 8, West Salem? What did we do in the fourth quarter? Let's do it again. So, yeah, again, you get teams that get all these blowouts, and you say, well, they're dominant. But, yeah, you got to be tested, and especially the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. Otherwise, you get lulled into a kind of a sense of where you're satisfied. Coaches want you hungry when playoff time starts. Blue Golds are going to be hungry.
They sure are, and it's really going to be interesting to see where Aquinas ends up division-wise because we saw them play Columbus a couple of years ago in the postseason, different divisions last year. I'm excited to see how it all plays out with the trickle-down from those upper divisions all the way down, how that impacts with what division these teams are competing in. In at number 2 in the small school media poll this week, it is your Columbus Cardinals once again. Dennis, a lot of points on Friday night, 57-33. They beat Cedar Grove, Belgium, who was no pushover by any means. Columbus got it done, though. A lot of points on the board. They have now clinched the Capital Conference title, and they will face Beloit Turner in Week 9, but the Cardinals gearing up for a big postseason run.
This is the team Barry Alvarez would love. 515 yards rushing last week.
Woo-wee!
And Connor Roach, 26 carries, 318 yards, 4 touchdowns. He has just been on fire. He'll be definitely an all-state candidate here this year. Be looking to see what happens, with the Cardinals in the postseason honors. But they're averaging 44 points and 354 yards rushing. Most teams don't average 300 yards total, and they got that many more rushing. Wow. Talk about the Air Cardinals, the Cardinals soaring. No, this is ground chuck, baby. Yeah, Barry'd love it.
Columbus Cardinal football, by the way, you can follow along on Daily Dodge TV and ESPN Beaver Dam throughout the course of the postseason.
They got to love them calling those games.
Our friends up at, not only do they get a bunch of points in a winner, but they're also done by 9 o'clock every night because it's natural running clock all the time. Yeah, we're a little selfish in that sense sometimes when we think of these games. But no, Columbus is a really, really good team, and I'm excited to see how far they make it in the postseason. And number 1, it's the same team that's been number 1 wire to wire, the Stratford Tigers. Perfect 8-0, 48-20 winner over Amherst. We said, Dennis, last week, Amherst could give Stratford a game. Turns out Stratford may have hurt us, and that was all the motivation that the Tigers needed to cement the CWC large conference title.
Well, they'd only given up 60 points all season, gave up 20 to Amherst. So it kind of dented them a little bit there, but they're giving up 10 points a game, so the defense has been phenomenal.
We're talking about the dent being when they still won by 28 points.
By 28 points, right. Yeah. So subs got in the fourth quarter. Maybe they gave up a touchdown or two. But, Stratford's been number one. And as you said, now Loyal Greenwood this week at 1-7. Ouch, that's last week was senior week since Stratford's on the road this week. So that's a good way to beat Amherst senior night.
If you're paying close attention to our small school rankings, you will notice that we could have simply re-aired last week's show. All of these teams are in the exact same order as they were last week, 1 through 10 in the small school media poll. No change to the rankings this week. Hunter Vaughn, our producer behind the glass, what stood out most to you in accumulating the data for the rankings here in the small school this week from our voters around the state?
Well, I mean, other than the lack of change, of course, the two schools that didn't get into the top 10, but Winneconne, they came in, would have been number 11 if we went that far down on things. They got 13 points. They needed 15 to be able to overtake St. Mary's Springs, but they peaked at number 5 in a poll. So there's a few voters that really like this Winneconne team. They're a team to watch out for come postseason.
It's interesting.
And then also Milwaukee Academy of Science. I got an email about them from one of our voters a few weeks back saying, hey, they're undefeated. They're a legitimate team. This is somebody to look out for. They peaked at number 3 in their poll, but unfortunately didn't get quite enough. They got 10 points, so they would have been tied with Cambridge to be a number 12 team. So those are two teams that, as we get it closer to the postseason here, to really look out for, that could make deep runs that haven't been quite getting the love in the poll.
Sleepers in your bracket to watch out for. That's a great insight, Hunter. Thank you.
And Winneconne unbeaten, but they host Seymour this week for the Bay Conference title. Seymour 7-1, 5-1. And their only loss was 25-24 to Fox Valley Lutheran. So that could be a really tight game. And if Winneconne wins and somebody drops out, they'll probably be the first one in.
We'll see if we see more teams making their first debut in the rankings next week.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been here all season.
We set that up for you.
Jesse Nelson, Dennis Semrau, producer Hunter Vaughn with you here on the ESPN Wisconsin High School Football Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show. The small schools, no change from last week, 1 through 10. Let's see how the large school rankings were impacted by some big games a week ago. Let's get to the large school rankings. Again, enrollment size 550 and more. Teams expected to compete in Divisions 3, 2, and 1 for state championships at Camp Randall Stadium on Friday in November. The number 10 team this week in the large school media poll is the Kaukauna Galloping Ghosts, down 3 spots from last week's poll when they made their debut this season. We were wondering how Kaukauna and Kimberly would play out this week. Kaukauna falls 38-20 to the Papermakers. Statement win for Kimberly when Kaukauna was feeling some momentum heading into the week. It does set up a potential 3-way tie. We can talk more about that when we unveil Kimberly here in these rankings. The number 9 team in this week's large school media poll, Mount Horeb Barneveld, perfect 8-0. Dennis, only 16 points they put up. A team that's really known for a lot of offensive explosions this year. 16-0. They defeat the Edgewood Crusaders in Week 8, but that's enough to clinch the Badger Small Conference title outright.
Yeah, that was an 8-0 into the fourth quarter. And talking to the coaches, both teams had chances in the red zone and just were not able to convert. Mount Horeb went for it on fourth down, I think 3 times, and came up without any points. You say, why don't you kick a field goal? They go for 2 on all their extra points until they have to kick an extra point. So they're going to try to punch it in. And Edgewood's had some pretty good defense this year. They've had a lot of injuries, but that was a gut check kind of game. We're going to see them this week with Sauk Prairie, with the winner of that Edgewood Sauk Prairie team getting in the playoffs. So Edgewood had a lot to play for last week. And maybe Barneveld was saying, well, we got the conference title. Kids will be kids. So I don't know what happened other than Edgewood just gave them everything they could handle.
They could, and Edgewood playing inspired. By the way, shout out to Badgers head coach Luke Fickle, both of his sons, Aiden and Ashton, suffering season-ending injuries for the Edgewood Crusaders.
ACL week 1 and then another one against Stoughton. So
tough.
And both of them were starting on both sides of the ball. So
I'm sure we'll see them back in action in the coming years, but that's a tough one.
They're twins, and they have the ACL on the same knee, I understand.
Yes.
Sorry, Coach. No, Coach has had a couple of rough weeks, and with his kids being out. He's a family guy, so our thoughts go out to them. But I'm sure the boys will be back next year.
Mount Horeb-Barneveld, plenty back. They have their eyes set on Camp Randall Stadium, 8-0 champions of the Badger Small Conference, in at number 9 in the large school poll this week. Number 8, first time in the poll for the Slinger Owls. Can I get a hooty hoo?
Hoot.
We got to work on that. I don't think that was our best, Dennis. Slinger, 22-21 winners over Homestead. First time ranked for Slinger. They are 8-0 this season. Get this. Slinger beats Homestead. Touchdown with 3 seconds left. Go for 2, and they convert the 2-point conversion on a wide receiver double pass to win it 22-21. Slinger with the upset win over Homestead. It was a home game for Slinger. You know those fans were going crazy. They're 8-0. They're ranked. What a week for Slinger.
Yeah, and they were lined up for to kick, and Homestead calls a timeout. Slinger goes, hey, let's go for 2. Why not? And they pull a trick play out of it. So the trick play was, okay, they lined up for 2. Running back Santos Rodriguez took a handoff and the quarterback. They both were in the shotgun. Rodriguez pitched to Lucas San, who's streaking in left to right in the backfield. He stopped and threw to an open Chase Leverance in the right corner of the end zone. And
so
I'm
basically
sure,
the Philly special is kind of what you described
I'm
there.
sure everybody's like, what is going on here? And first thing, what do? You look for a flag. There's no flag. Yes. So
3 seconds left in the game, and they decide to do that.
Outstanding way to finish it. That was a battle of 2 5-0 teams for the North Shore Conference title, too. So that was a huge game.
And speaking of huge games, it's not done for Slinger. So here's the deal in the North Shore Conference. Slinger at Cedarburg this week. We have had a North Shore team ranked in every poll this year. It just has been a matter of who it's been. Cedarburg for a while, then Homestead last week. Now it's Slinger. Cedarburg hosts Slinger this week. If Slinger wins, they win the conference title outright. 3-way tie is in play here, because if Cedarburg wins, then you've got the situation where Cedarburg would beat Slinger, Slinger would beat Homestead, Homestead would have beaten Cedarburg. So it would be the kind of the circle of life there in the North Shore Conference, like we've seen in a couple other scenarios around the state. But this just goes to show you a lot of quality teams out there that could make big postseason runs, whether they're officially conference titles winners or not. So Cedarburg, Homestead, Slinger, all teams to keep an eye on as we get into the postseason. What a game this week for Slinger. Definitely the win of the week, no doubt. Number 7 in the large school media poll heading into week 9. The Arrowhead Warhawks. Again, no team has traveled further up and down the top 10 than the Arrowhead Warhawks this season. They are number 7 this week, up 1 spot following a 44-16 win over Brookfield East. Arrowhead, McGuanago tied for first place in the Classic 8 conference. So we talked about Dennis
with Oconomowoc.
With Oconomowoc.
So
I'm sorry, I failed to mention them.
There too.
And because Oconomowoc beat Arrowhead back in week 6, McGuanago beat Oconomowoc. So again, it all comes down to potential 3-way tie scenario. Arrowhead wraps up with Kettle Moraine. I think regardless of whether they win the conference title or not, both McGuanago and Arrowhead are forces, and it all comes down to how that bracket shakes out. Who gets the home game in that, if they end up in the same sectional, if they get split up, could they meet at Camp Randall? I don't know if that could even happen with those Classic 8 teams. This is going to be fun to see all about the bracket for those teams heading into the postseason.
You want to find out who's where. Again, we were looking at Division III, Mount Horeb-Barneveld, and Green Bay Notre Dame. Last year they played level 3. Maybe this year they could be in level 5 in the finals. You never know. That's what people have dreams every year, and then you have to wait to see what the brackets are. Then either you're happy or you're angry. We'll see what side they go on.
Arrowhead, along with Kaukauna, the only 2 lost teams ranked in our large school top 10 this week. In at number 6. The Marquette Hilltoppers, they're down 1 spot. They were on the other side of this graphic as you see it with us on the YouTube stream last week. Marquette was a top 5 team a week ago. They win 50-10 against Sussex Hamilton. You would think normally that'd be good enough to keep them in the top 5, but a more impressive week for someone else sends Marquette down 1 spot. So if they're down, who had that impressive week? Who jumped them? In at number 5, the Kimberly Papermakers. there they are. Fox Valley, Kimberly defeats Kaukauna, another top 10 team. And just to show you the respect the voters have for Kimberly, Kaukauna loses that game. They have 2 losses on the year, but they're still in the top 10 because Kimberly is that good.
Yes, definitely. Kimberly, they're forced now a 3-way tie in that conference there. Ellison, 213 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, ran for a touchdown. So that was huge for Kimberly. Again, it was nice. 6-1. Remember, they didn't have that opening game.
They didn't play in week 1, so they are 1 game short compared to everybody else in the.
But yeah, you got a
record.
3-way tie now in that conference, so we'll see what happens this week.
Kaukauna, Neenah, and Kimberly all in the 3-way tie scenario if everybody beats up on each other as well. So excited to see how it plays out in the Fox Valley, excited to see how it plays out in the North Shore, and also in the Classic 8, speaking of which, in at number 4, the Mukwonago Indians, 49-14 winners over Waukesha West. Mukwonago is actually done with Classic 8 conference play. They get Marquette, the 6th-ranked team here in Week 9, which is awesome heading into the postseason. I don't know if you're a Mukwonago fan, if you want to play the 6th-ranked team in Week 9 in a non-conference game, or if you want that heading into the postseason. Dennis, how would you feel if you were covering Mukwonago on a regular basis about that matchup with number 4 and number 6 meeting in Week 9?
Well, it's like with teams that have a bye first round in basketball. You'd rather be going in competing at a high level. Now, it depends what your injury status is. If you've got some players that you want to get healthy and you have to use them in a game that might impact the conference title, yeah, I think you want to play it. But I don't know. As a fan, I just want to see great games. And this is going to be a great game. It's
going to be fantastic, but it is interesting because Arrowhead is 6-2, Mukwonago is 7-1. If Mukwonago wins, they are clearly one of the best teams in Division I in the state because their only loss was on the road by 1 to Arrowhead back in Week 3. But if Mukwonago loses this game, then they have the same record as Arrowhead, theoretically, heading into the postseason, and Arrowhead would own the head-to-head tiebreaker. So even though Arrowhead had a worse loss other than that game, I wonder if the committees and the seeding and the brackets, how it's all seeded electronically, if it would give Arrowhead the advantage there. That's one of the big question marks.
Yeah, it is because they have their criteria, but they're not transparent on everything, and there's a reason they do that. People want to know why, because it's just like conference champions don't mean anything anymore. It used to be you had to declare who the conference champ was when you had a tie. It doesn't because of the seeding process.
So we will see what that means for that seeding process at Saturday morning when it's all unveiled. But going to be fun to see Mukwonago, Arrowhead, how it all shakes out in that section, in that conference, in that division heading into the postseason. The number 3 team in the state, Mukwonago, down 1 spot from last week. They are leapfrogged once again by the Verona Wildcats. Last week they flip-flopped. It was Verona 4, Mukwonago 3. Now they're right back where they were 2 weeks ago. Verona's back into the number 3 spot, undefeated on the season. They have clinched the Big 8 conference title, and they dominated 69-0 against the Madison East program that's been going through its fair share of struggles this season. Dennis?
35-0 first quarter, I think, was the score of that game. And that was an early game. We had the Middleton-La Follette game last week. And what they started at 6 o'clock, so we already knew they were way ahead.
By the time you got on the air, it might have been almost over, yeah.
That extended their winning streak in Big 8 play to 20 games. And they have Janesville Craig, who's a playoff eligible, that could give the Wildcats all they could handle. And if Verona wins, 3 straight unbeaten conference seasons titles. That's pretty incredible for Coach Riley.
That's really incredible in what has been a competitive conference for many years. Verona cementing its legacy here over the last 3 years. And Coach Riley, when he showed up to take over that program, has dominated conference play, including rival Middleton, with some D1 talent on that Middleton team, too. Those have been no slouches that they've been able to beat. Quickly, let's check number 2 and number 1 here in the large school media poll this week. Number 2 is, again, the Notre Dame Tritons, 8-0. They have not yet clinched officially the FRCC South Conference title because they play Oshkosh North, who is 5-1 in conference play this week. So in theory, Oshkosh North could beat Notre Dame.
It's Oshkosh West.
I'm sorry. So they play this week, and they could potentially split the conference title, but Green Bay seems like they're going to be in good shape. Notre Dame, the Tritons, and again, collision course potentially with Mount Horeb, Barneveld, and Camp Randall if it all plays out the way we certainly hope that it may for these two Division III juggernauts. Number 1 team this week, the Franklin Sabres, yet again, 49-7 winners over Kenosha Indian Trail. No change from last week. They have clinched the Southeast Conference Championship, and they get Racine Horlick on the road in Week 9 to close it out. But we said a couple of weeks ago, Franklin's toughest part of its schedule is done. They look like they're going to go undefeated.
7th straight conference title. Think about that. These guys the seniors were in 5th grade last time.
Unreal. Franklin has been a juggernaut. Again, we expect to potentially see them at Camp Randall again this year, depending on how the bracket shakes out. But again, we'll find out all that with the playoff bracket on Saturday. For now, we focus on the rankings and a few movers and shakers here in the large division poll this week. Hunter Vaughn, what stood out to you in collecting the data from our voters all around the state?
I feel like I've brought this up a few times, but it hit again where our voters are really undecided on the Verona Wildcats. And I think it's because of their offense. I know you could look at the box score and say, oh, well, they put up a bunch of points on Madison East this last week. They've got a great offense. They've struggled against better teams. Verona received votes at the 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 spots in this poll. So they're all over the place in the voters' minds. McWanago, they were solidly 2, 3, and 4 for all of their votes. It was just down to a couple of points. Kaukauna also, even with that loss, they stayed at number 10. They just barely beat out Oconomowoc by 1 point. So it was a very tight race there for that number 10, and a team that didn't get into the top 10 but finally bounced back up, Waunakee. They figured things out after that early season loss against Madison Memorial. They're a team to watch out for. They're going to be in the Division I, and we talk a lot about the polls. I'm calling my shot here. I have a feeling we're going to see a Verona as a 1 seed in their sectional, and I think we're going to get Oconomowoc as a 2 seed potentially here. And if that happens, that is going to be an incredible level 4 if both of those are playing, or level 3 it would be playing each other.
Yeah, that could be interesting. Look at our bracketologist, Hunter Vaughn, back here, not only accumulating the poll data, but predicting the playoff field as well.
Yeah, coming in, though, for Division I, there's nobody up north that's unbeaten. There's 5 unbeaten teams in the South. Somebody's going to have to go up there.
And Kimberly, right.
Will it be Verona? Will it be
Marquette?
No, Marquette's not unbeaten. Will it be...
Oh, the unbeaten teams, you're saying. So Verona, there's Slinger, if they hold on and finish the year unbeaten, but that'd be Division II potentially, I think. It all comes down to how the qualifications go for this postseason.
And how the computer views this. That's the big thing, too, to remind everyone. This isn't the coaches getting together at some school cafeteria anymore. This is they plug in the school's data and a computer spits it out. So there isn't that level of human element, understanding that, like, oh, yeah, this team lost to a really, really good team. Like, Waunakee losing to Madison Memorial might hurt them with where they get sent because the computer might just view Madison Memorial as not being as good of a team as what someone else's loss is. So that's where this could get really interesting on Saturday.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because Memorial's loss was to Verona, 10-0. Middleton lost to Memorial, gave up a bunch of points, but they pretty much dominated everybody else through the schedule. So, and I had a good talk yesterday with a couple of the coaches that said, just Norris of Edgewood was saying in Ohio, the better teams that you play counts more. You get points whether you win or not. If you win, you get a lot more points than if you lose, but you'd rather be scheduling those teams up. And right now, again, the Big 8 is down. You look at the city schools, East and La Follette, and West has had a better season there. Maybe if they win this week, they're playoff eligible. But so unless you actually have knowledge of the computer and you're with the WA, that's a pretty well kept secret. So we, like everybody else, we got to wait till Saturday morning at 10 o'clock when they have the reveal show.
So regardless of what the computers may do, regardless of how Week 9 may shake out, Dennis Semrau, if you had to lock in right now one team in our large school top 10 to say this is a team I expect to see at Camp Randall Stadium, you're going to put all your eggs in that basket, who is it?
From local?
No, I'm saying in our top 10 in the large schools. So it could be any of them. Who's the one that stands out to you?
Franklin.
Defending? Why not? Yeah,
Defending
they were there a week or a year ago.
Yeah, they lost to Marquette last year. and that's their revenge factor.
They've been there several years over the last decade. Yeah, I could see Franklin being a great pick there.
Another great quarterback, Joey Calais, this week, 11 of 15, 316 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, you got a signal caller just like like they had a couple years ago.
Hunter, if you had to pick one team that you're going to circle for sure, lock them into Camp Randall, who is it?
It's Green Bay Notre Dame. Because the weather's going to get bad at some point here in the playoffs, and the thing that Green Bay Notre Dame does the best is run the ball with Christian Collins. They're just going to be able to do that, and I think they're just going to take the will away from these other teams they see. It might be smooth sailing for Green Bay Notre Dame until they potentially run into maybe Mount Horeb Barneveld.
I think I want to pick Kimberly, but I'm not. They've been so good. The one game against Nina is throwing me off with Kimberly because they've been so good and they just took down Kakana in convincing fashion. Like I feel like that one peg knockdown by losing to Nina actually will propel Kimberly on a big run all the way to state. Give them a little something extra motivation by having a loss that they've incurred in the regular season.
Well, I think the thing, too, to remember with that loss to Nina is the fact that Nina has Grant Dean. He's one of the best players and athletes in this state, and he kind of took over that game. I mean, he's going to go and play for the Badgers, so, I get where that's – as much as there is no such thing as really a good loss, Kimberly's loss was a good loss. That's a good Nina team.
So those are our picks. We'll see how it all shakes out. We do have one more show to go for you for the regular season. We will unveil our end-of-season rankings next week. Plus, the playoff field will be out. We'll be able to talk about who these teams are matched up against and what their path to Camp Randall potentially looks like. We'll give you the end of the regular season rankings next week. And then a few weeks later, after the state championships are all done, we will have an end-of-year high school football rankings reveal show one final time, including all of our state champions who ultimately hoist the gold ball at Camp Randall.
You didn't ask for one for the small school poll team.
All right, Dennis, before we go, who's your small school team you want to circle? And tell me why it's Stratford.
No,
Okay.
I'm going Columbus because you got to be able to run the football, and they can throw it too. They just haven't had to. And anytime you can pile up, and their conference opponents – I mean, that's been a good conference. And Lodi and Lake Mills, they both destroyed. Their best competition. They have not been challenged other than, and who did they beat early in the season?
Columbus beat Aquinas earlier this year. Yeah, so that was a huge win for the Columbus Cardinals, no doubt. Hunter, who's your small school team that you're circling?
I'm actually going towards the bottom. St. Mary Springs. I feel like it's almost like it's a movie level way to write it. We saw with Lodi going out in Dave Pohl's last game. I have a feeling we're going to see the same thing for St. Mary Springs with Bob Hyland's last game at Camp Randall.
Give me Stratford, and that'll do it for this week's ESPN Wisconsin High School Football Media Poll Ranking Reveal Show. One more week to go in the regular season. One more ranking show for the regular season next week as we get set for the playoffs. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been the ESPN Wisconsin High School Football Media Poll Rankings Reveal Show.